Hello, friends. This is Darren Hayes of Pigskin.com. Before we take you to your favorite Sports History Network show, just want to tell you a little bit about some merch that you can pick up that represents your favorite SHN podcast. So far, there's t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even books from some of the authors that do podcasts right here on SHN. Who could buy something better than that, than have the history right from the gentleman that you hear talking about it? But we also are adding things each and every day. And where's that store, may you ask? Well, it's at SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Up at the top, there is the SHN merch button. Click on that. It'll take you right to the store, and you can be representing your favorite podcast and show the world that, hey, on the swag that I'm using, it's the headquarters of sports yesteryear, Sports History Network, and my favorite podcaster, the Sports History Network store. Shop there today. Hitting that rewind button once again to take us all the way back in time to a particular year in football shows a couple of great stories of the college game in 1929 in this edition of the Football History Rewind. An injured coach's continual inspiration to his players, and there was one proud mother in New Haven. As these stories and more are part of our Football History Rewind, coming up in a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with PigskinDispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another edition of the Football History Rewind. As we go through year by year in some of the greatest seasons of football in history, we started way back in the beginning, actually an ancient civilization of the precursors of the game, and we worked our way all the way up to this series, this episode of talking about 1929 and the college football game in this part number 64 of Football History Rewind. But before we get to that, let's make sure you are aware of our newsletter. We have a daily newsletter comes out, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. So easy to sign up. You can go in the show notes of this very podcast or at the top of PigskinDispatch.com. Easy to sign up. You'll know everything that's going on in Yesteryear Hub and the Pig Pen for everything that we're involved with. And that's Pigskin Dispatch. That's Jersey Dispatch. That's Orville Mulligan Sports Writer. And, of course, the SportsHistoryNetwork.com. So we'd love to have you be a part of that and enjoy us every single day, know what's going on. Now, let's get into our story. The story of the history of football has taken us to the end of the decade of the 1920s. The 1929 season of NCAA football did not have anything substantial in rule revisions, but it did have some memorable moments. On this road full of obstacles, it had Notre Dame having a disappointing year in 1928, and no one was more bound to correct that than head coach Knute Rockne at the time. Rockne was very upset about his team's 4 losses in the previous season, including 2 in a row, the only time this ever occurred under Rockne's watch. Well, that was the 1928 season. This was 1929, and the march to a national championship would not be easy for Knute and the boys, as a couple of glaring obstacles met them before the season start. Notre Dame Stadium was under construction during the season, so all the games in 1929 were scheduled to be played on the road. This is making them a serious road warrior team. Very difficult to win on the road, as we know. A more serious issue was that Rockne had developed a blood clot in his leg. The phlebitis was so severe, enough to restrict the great coach to a wheelchair, which kept him from traveling to the road games after the first one against Indiana in a 14-0 win. Rockne would still attend practices in his wheelchair, armed with a bullhorn. And remember, they're playing all these games on the road. So assistant coach Tom Lieb led the team in the games as Rockne would call long distance to speak with Lieb and the team before the games. Against his doctor's orders, Knute went with the team to Pittsburgh in the 4th game of the season against Carnegie Tech, 2 days after the stock market crashed and the Great Depression had started. The head coach would not patrol the sidelines, but Lieb did carry him into the locker room at halftime of the scoreless tie to rally the troops. Rockne was endangering his life by doing this, as a clot could loosen if he got excited, but Knute wanted to win games despite the risk of his own health. His speech on this day went something to the tune of asking the team if they thought he attended this game risking his life to see them lose. And would they let that happen after he suffered so much to be with them? His oratory fired up the team enough to pull out a 7-0 win after they scored in the second half. Now, Rockne also attended the games at Soldier Field in Chicago, where the Irish defeated USC 13-12 in a thriller before a crowd of over 112,000 fans. Now, he would have had to settle on listening at home on his radio on the final game of the year against Army from Yankee Stadium, though. The nation was 1 month into the Great Depression, but still, the paid attendance of this game in New York City was over 79,000 paid fans. The Irish prevailed in the game 7-0 and locked up the 1929 National Championship with a perfect season of 9-0-0. And a great record there, and a great coach in Knute Rockne. Now, we also had another team on the rise that was once a powerhouse, and that's the Yale Bulldogs. Now, we haven't discussed the Yale Bulldogs too much lately in Football History Rewinds. Their day had really set back in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. But it was due to their decline in their program during the 1920s. However, they certainly would add excitement during the 1929 season with some of their exploits on the field. An excellent one-player performance by quarterback Albie Booth against Army had all of the Yale supporters cheering again. Army was dominant in the first half of this game, played at the Yale Bowl. The Cadets breezed out to a 13-0 lead and looked for total control of the contest. That condition soon changed, though, as Army fumbled at their own 32-yard line late in the half, and Yale recovered. Booth carried the ball repeatedly and scored a touchdown just before the half to make the score 13-7. The Yale crowd was in a frenzy at halftime, and Booth and the guys did not disappoint in the second half as Albie scored another touchdown and even punched through his second drop kick of the day to put Yale in the lead 14-13. Booth had the inspiration of his mother attending her very first football game, and he was still invigorated to do more in this contest. His next exploit would go down in history as the legend of the, quote, Little Boy Blue. Yale held Army on the next series and forced them to punt. And Albie was deep return man for the Blue, and he fielded the kick at his own 35-yard line and started heading for the sideline. The Army coverage converged on him and appeared ready to knock Albie out of bounds to the end of the return, but somehow Booth cut back at the last moment and broke through the Cadets into the open field. One last Army defender wrapped his arms around Booth at the 25-yard line, but Albie spun and broke free once again to score that touchdown. When Booth exited the game, he was met with a standing ovation that would go down in history as one of the most incredible roaring cheers in Yale's football lore. And what an exciting moment that must have been. And that young man having his mother attend her very first football game, and he performed for Mama, that's for sure. That's a great story, and one I never get tired of telling. And very exciting for the Yale Bulldogs that day. And for Notre Dame, what a great job, Knute Rockne, having that blood clot and just risking his life going to all these few of these road games when his doctors were telling him not to because it could have killed him. Wow, that's just something, and the Irish responded to his challenges. So we thank you once again for joining us for the Football History Rewind. Hope you join us for each and all of our segments. We are, reduced our count of episodes on the podcast just a little bit. We're on 3 or 4 times a week. Hope you enjoy those, and we're trying to bring you some good quality and some good stories, and as well some excellent guests, historians, to talk about a lot of different things in the preservation of football history. And we'd sure love to have you join us each time. And one way to do it is that newsletter. It'll tell you when those are coming up. Also, subscribe on your favorite podcast provider, and that'll also tell you when new releases drop. So till next time, everybody, have a great Gridiron Day. Peeking up at the clock, the time's running down. We're going to go into victory formation, take a knee, and let this baby run out. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back tomorrow for the next podcast. We invite you to check out our website, PigskinDispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. PigskinDispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. A special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.